Alcide Amedeo Francesco de Gasperi was an Italian statesman and politician who founded the Christian Democracy Party. From 1945 to 1953, he was the Prime Minister of 8 successive coalition governments. His 8-year term in office remains a landmark of political longevity for a leader in modern Italian politics. A conservative Catholic, he was one of the founding fathers of the European Union, along with fellow Italian Altiero Spinelli, the French Robert Schuman, and the West German Chancellor Konrad Adenauer. Early years. De Gasperi was born in Pieve Tesino in Tyrol, which at the time belonged to Austria-Hungary, now part of the province of Trentino in Italy. His father was a local police officer of limited financial means. From 1896, De Gasperi was active in the social Christian movement. In 1900 he joined the Faculty of Literature and Philosophy in Vienna, where he played an important role in the inception of the Christian student movement. He was very much inspired by the Rerum Novarum encyclical issued by Pope Leo XIII in 1891. In 1904 he took an active part in student demonstrations in favor of an Italian-language university. Imprisoned with other protesters during the inauguration of the Italian Juridical Faculty in Innsbruck, he was released after 20 days. In 1905, De Gasperi obtained a degree in philology. In 1905 he began to work as editor of the newspaper La Voce Catalina, which was replaced in September 1906 by Il Trentino, and after a short time he became its editor. In his newspaper, he often took positions in favor of a cultural autonomy for Trentino and in defense of Italian culture in Trentino, in contrast to the Germanization plans of the German radical nationalists in Tyrol. However, he never questioned whether Trentino should belong to Austria-Hungary and claimed that, in the case of a referendum, 90% of the people of Trentino would nevertheless choose the popular Austrian Emperor Franz Joseph I of Austria over the Italian motherland. In 1911 he became a Member of Parliament for the Popular Political Union of Trentino in the Austrian Reichsrat, a post he held for 6 years. He was politically neutral during World War I, which he spent in Vienna. However, he sympathized with the ultimately unsuccessful efforts of Pope Benedict XV and Bl. Karl I of Austria to obtain an honorable peace and stop the war and mass killing. When his home region was transferred to Italy in the post-war settlement, he accepted Italian citizenship. He, however, never tried to hide his love for Austria and German culture and often preferred speaking German to his family, many of whom spoke German as the first language. Opposition to fascism. In 1919 he was among the founders of the Italian People's Party, with Luigi Sturzo. He served as a deputy in the Italian Parliament from 1921 to 1924, a period marked by the rise of fascism. He initially supported the participation of the PPI in Benito Mussolini's first government in October 1922. As Mussolini's hold on the Italian government grew stronger, he soon diverged with the fascists over constitutional changes to the powers of the executive and to the election system, and to fascist violence against the constitutional parties, culminating in the murder of Giacomo Matteotti. The PPI split, and De Gasperi became secretary of the remaining anti-fascist group in May 1924. In November 1926, in a climate of overt violence and intimidation by the fascists, the PPI was dissolved. De Gasperi was arrested in March 1927 and sentenced to 4 years in prison. The Vatican negotiated his release. A year and a half in prison nearly broke De Gasperi's hell. After his release in July 1928, he was unemployed and in serious financial hardship, until in 1929 his ecclesiastical contacts secured him a job as a cataloguer in the Vatican Library, where he spent the next 14 years until the collapse of fascism in July 1943. Founding Christian democracy. During World War II, he organized the establishment of the first Christian Democracy Party, drawing upon the ideology of the Popular Party. In January 1943, he published Ideas for Reconstruction, which amounted to a program for the party. He became the first general secretary of the new party in 1944. De Gasperi was the undisputed head of the Christian Democrats, the party that dominated Parliament for decades. Although his control of the DC appeared almost complete, he had to carefully balance different factions and interests, especially with regards to relations with the Vatican, social reform, and foreign policy. When southern Italy was liberated by the Allies, he became one of the main representatives of the Christian democracy in the National Liberation Committee. During the government led by Ivano Bonomi, De Gasperi was appointed minister without portfolio, and, in Ferruccio Parri's cabinet, he became Minister of Foreign Affairs. Prime Minister of Italy. From 1945 to 1953, he was the Prime Minister of 8 successive Christian democratic governments. His 8-year rule remains a landmark of political longevity for one leader in modern Italian politics. During his successive governments, Italy became a republic, signed a peace treaty with the Allies, joined the North Atlantic Treaty Organization in 1949, and became an ally of the United States, which helped to revive the Italian economy through the Marshall Plan. During that time, Italy became a member of the European Coal and Steel Community, which evolved into the European Union. In December 1945, he became Prime Minister for the first time, succeeding Ferruccio Parri and leading a coalition government that included both Italian Communist Party and Italian Socialist Party, along with other minor parties like Italian Republican Party, Italian Liberal Party and Action Party. Communist leader Palmiro Togliatti acted as vice premier. He tried to soften the terms of the pending Allied peace treaty with Italy and secured financial and economic aid through the European Recovery Program, which was opposed by the Communists. In June 1946, Italy held the constitutional referendum to decide whether Italy would remain a monarchy or become a republic. The Republicans won with 54% of the vote. De Gasperi was appointed provisional head of state from 18 to the 28th of June, when the Constituent Assembly elected the liberal Enrico De Nicola as the new head of state. As chief of the Italian delegation at the World War II Peace Conference in Paris, De Gasperi harshly criticized the sanctions imposed to Italy, but obtained concessions from the Allies that guaranteed Italian sovereignty. Under the Treaty of Peace with Italy, 1947, the eastern border area was lost to Yugoslavia and the Free Territory of Trieste was divided between the two states. One of his most striking achievements in foreign policy was the Gruber-De Gasperi Agreement with Austria in September 1946, that established his home region, Southern Tyrol, as an autonomous region. American support. De Gasperi enjoyed considerable support in the U.S., where he was considered able to oppose the rising tide of communism, in particular the PCI, which was the biggest communist party in a Western European democracy. In January 1947 he visited the U.S. The chief goals of the trip were to soften the terms of the pending peace treaty with Italy, and to obtain immediate economic assistance. His 10-day tour, engineered by media mogul Henry Luce, the owner of Time magazine, and his wife, Clare Boothe-Luce, the future ambassador to Rome, was viewed as a media triumph, prompting positive comments of a wide section of the American press. During his meetings in the U.S., he managed to secure a financially modest but politically significant $100 million Ex-Im Bank loan to Italy. According to De Gasperi, public opinion would view the loan as a vote of confidence in the Italian government and strengthen his position versus the Communist Party in the context of the emerging Cold War. The positive results strengthened De Gasperi's reputation in Italy. He also came back with useful information on the incipient change in American foreign policy that would lead to the Cold War and in Italy, the break with the communists and left-wing socialists and the removal from the government in the May 1947 crisis. In May 1947, the United States President Harry Truman ordered to De Gasperi of creating a new government without the support of communists and socialists. A new cabinet was formed with the centrist Italian Democratic Socialist Party of Giuseppe Saragat, the Italian Liberal Party of Luigi Einaudi and the Italian Republican Party of Randolfo Pacciardi. The three leaders of the minor parties were appointed deputy prime ministers. General election in 1948. The general elections in April 1948 were heavily influenced by the Cold War confrontation between the Soviet Union and the United States. After the Soviet-inspired February 1948 communist coup in Czechoslovakia, the U.S. became alarmed about Soviet intentions and feared that, if the leftist coalition were to win the elections, the Soviet-funded Italian Communist Party would draw Italy into the Soviet Union's sphere of influence. In the U.S., a campaign was launched to prevent a victory of the communist-dominated Popular Democratic Front. Italian Americans were encouraged to write letters to the relatives in Italy. The popular Italian-American singer Frank Sinatra made a Voice of America radio broadcast. The Central Intelligence Agency funneled black bag contributions to anti-communist candidates with the approval of the National Security Council, and President Truman, Joseph P. Kennedy and Clare Boothe-Luce helped to raise $2 million for the Christian Democrat Party. Time magazine backed the campaign and featured De Gasperi on its 19 April 1948 issue's cover and in its lead story. The election campaign remains unmatched in verbal aggression and fanaticism in Italy's history on both sides. The election was between two competing visions of the future of Italian society. On the one hand, a Roman Catholic, conservative and capitalist Italy, represented by the governing Christian Democrats of De Gasperi; on the other, a secular, revolutionary and socialist society, represented by the Popular Front. The Christian Democrat campaign claimed that, in communist countries, children send parents to jail, children are owned by the state, people eat their own children, and assured voters that disaster would strike Italy if the left were to take power. Another slogan was, in the secrecy of the polling booth, God sees you, Stalin doesn't. The communists were de facto leading the Popular Democratic Front, and had effectively marginalized the Socialist Party, which eventually suffered because of this in these elections. In terms of parliamentary seats and political power, the Socialists also had been hurt by the secession of a social democratic faction led by Giuseppe Saragat, which contested the election with the concurrent list of Socialist Unity. The PCI had difficulties in restraining its more militant members, who, in the period immediately after the war, had engaged in violent acts of reprisals. The areas affected by the violence had previously seen episodes of brutality committed by the fascists during Benito Mussolini's regime, and the Italian resistance during the Allies' gradual advance through Italy. The Christian Democrats won a resounding victory with 48.5% of the vote and strong majorities in both the Chamber of Deputies and Senate. The Communists received only half of the votes they had in 1946. Although De Gasperi could have formed an exclusively Christian democratic government, instead he formed a centrist coalition with liberals, Republicans and Social Democrats. De Gasperi formed three ministries, the second in 1950 after the defection of the liberals, who hoped for more rightist policies, and the third in 1951 after the defection of the Social Democrats, who hoped for more leftist policies. He ruled for 5 more years, helming 4 additional coalitions. De Gasperi's policy is patience, according to the foreign news correspondent for the New York Times, Anne McCormick. He seems to be feeling his way among the explosive problems he has to deal with, but perhaps this wary mine-detecting method is the stabilizing force that holds the country in balance. Social security reforms in domestic policy. A number of social security reforms were carried out by various ministers of De Gasperi's cabinets in the areas of rents and social housing, unemployment insurance and pensions. On the 9th of January 1946, the government reorganized the health insurance system for sharecroppers, tenant farmers, and agricultural workers, with a flat-rate daily indemnity of Lit. 28 for women and Lit. 60 for men for a maximum of 180 days a year, and free medical and hospital assistance provided through INAM. On the 19th of April 1946, the government reorganized the health insurance system for industrial employees, with a daily sickness indemnity equal to 50% of earnings, for a maximum of 180 days a year, a flat-rate maternity indemnity equal to a lump sum of Lit. 1,000 for 120 days, a funeral allowance and free medical, hospital, and pharmaceutical assistance through INAM. On the 31st of October 1947, the Italian Parliament approved a bill that reorganized the health insurance system for service employees, with a daily sickness indemnity equal to 50% of earnings for a maximum of 180 days a year, a flat-rate maternity payment, funeral allowance, and free hospital, medical, and pharmaceutical assistance through INAM. On the 28th of February 1949, De Gasperi launched a 7-year plan for social housing to increase the stock of economic housing by means of construction or purchase of economic accommodation. The law also established a special housing fund within the National Institute for Insurance. Moreover, on the 29th of July 1947, the government established a fund for social solidarity within INPS in order to pay graduated supplementary allowances to all pensions, compensating for inflation. A law of the 29th of April 1949 introduced new provisions for unemployment insurance and labor policy. A Central Commission for Work Training and Assistance for the Unemployed was set up with the task of monitoring the state of the labor market and the conditions of the unemployed, while regulations concerning the replacement of the unemployed into the labor market were introduced. Provincial offices for labor and full employment were also established, with local sections, which organized waiting lists, training courses, and the allocation of available jobs, amongst other services. Unemployment indemnity was increased to Lit. 200 per day, and its duration was extended from 120 to 180 days. Unemployment insurance was extended to agricultural workers, and a special unemployment benefit was introduced, paid under exceptional circumstances. Flat-rate benefit with ad hoc determined level for 90 to 180 days. Vocational training and professional qualification programs for the unemployed were also introduced, along with a fund for professional training of workers. On the 29th of April 1949 it was approved law that introduced new provisions for unemployment insurance and labor policy. A Central Commission for Work Training and Assistance for the Unemployed was established with the task of monitoring the state of the labor market and the conditions of the unemployed. On the 23rd of March 1948, the National Institute for Assistance of the Orphans of Italian Workers and the National Institute for Italian Pensioners were established, providing benefits and services for needy pensioners. On the 26th of August 1950, the government introduced various regulations covering maternity insurance for all female employees. In 1952, the party overwhelmingly endorsed his authority over the government and over the party. However, it was also the start of his decline. He came under increasing criticism from the emerging left wing in the party. The main accusations were that he was too cautious in social and economic reform, that he stifled debate, and that he subordinated the party to the interests of government. 1953 general election and decline. The 1953 general election was characterized by changes in the electoral law. Even if the general structure remained uncorrupted, the government introduced a superbonus of 2/3 of seats in the House for the coalition, which would obtain at large the absolute majority of votes. The change was strongly opposed by the opposition parties as well as DC's smaller coalition partners, who had no realistic chance of success under this system. The new law was called the Scam Law by its detractors, including some dissidents of minor government parties who founded special opposition groups to deny the artificial landslide to Christian democracy. The Holy See actively supported Christian democracy, declaring that it would be a mortal sin for a Catholic to vote for the Communist Party and excommunicating all its supporters. In practice, however, many communists remained religious. Amelia was known to be an area where people were both religious and communists. Giovanni Guareschi wrote his novels about Don Camillo, describing a village, Brescello, whose inhabitants are at the same time loyal to priest Camillo and communist Mayor Pepone, who are fierce rivals. The campaign of the opposition to the Scam Law achieved its goal. The government coalition won 49.9% of national vote, resulting in an ordinary proportional distribution of the seats. Minor dissident parties resulted determinant for the final result, especially the short-lived National Democratic Alliance. The leading party, Christian Democracy, did not repeat the extraordinary result of 5 years earlier, which had been obtained under special conditions linked to the Cold War, and lost a lot of votes to the right, including resurgent fascist politicians, particularly in southern Italy. Technically, the government won the election, winning a majority of seats in both houses, but the frustration with the lack of a supermajority caused significant tensions in the leading coalition. De Gasperi was forced to resign by the parliament on August 2. De Gasperi consequently retired and died 12 months later. The legislature continued with weak governments, with minor parties refusing institutional responsibilities. Giuseppe Pella rose to power, but fell after only 5 months, following heated disputes about the status of the Free Territory of Trieste which Pella was claiming. Aminto Fanfani's succeeding First Ministry failed to receive a vote of confidence in Parliament, whilst Mario Selber and Antonio Segni followed with more traditional centrist coalitions supported by Social Democrats and Liberals. Under the administration of Selber, the problem of Trieste was settled by ceding Koper to Yugoslavia. The parliamentary term was seen out by the minority government chaired by Adenauer, finishing a legislature which hugely weakened the office of the Prime Minister, held by 6 different leaders. In 1954, De Gasperi also had to give up the leadership of the party. Death and legacy. On 19 August 1954, Alcide De Gasperi died in Sella di Valsugana, in his beloved Trentino. It is said that he had to be given a state funeral as he had died with almost no means of his own, a jaw-dropping fact in a country where, even then, politicians were expected to do well for themselves. He is buried in the Basilica di San Lorenzo Fuori le Mura, a basilica in Rome. The process for his beatification was opened in 1993. De Gasperi was against exacerbating conflict, according to his former secretary and former Prime Minister Giulio Andreotti. He taught us to search for compromise, to mediate. He is considered to be one of the founding fathers of the European Union. For the very beginning of European integration, De Gasperi, Robert Schuman, and Konrad Adenauer met regularly. He helped to organize the Council of Europe and supported the Schuman Declaration, which in 1951 led to the foundation of the European Coal and Steel Community, a forerunner in the process of European integration. He was named president of the community in 1954, and although the project eventually failed, De Gasperi helped to develop the idea of the common European defense policy. In 1952, he received the Karls Prize, an award by the German city of Aachen to people who contributed to the European idea and European peace. The 1954-1955 academic year at the College of Europe was named in his honor.